What I see when I watch other people's films. Goodfellas. I'm sure this won't be the last time I'm talking about this film, but I want to talk about the coda. The Layla Coda. It's no secret that part of the song was inspired by Eric Clapton's secret love affair with George Harrison's wife, Pattie Boyd. Although there is another component of the song that is literary inspired, what Scorsese seems to depend on here is the connection we're going to make as it concerns the pop culture aspects of the song. The affair. Layla, a story about something forbidden yet exciting, and the very act of getting away with doing something forbidden makes it all the more exciting, which parallels the mob life in much the way the characters of Goodfellas carry themselves throughout the film. The Layla Coda comes at the latter quarter of the film. In the aftermath of the historic Lufthansa heist, the character of Jimmy Conway, played by Robert De Niro, goes on a rampage, executing his compatriots in an attempt to keep the stolen millions for himself. Layla, by Derek and the Dominoes, is synced to a finely shot and edited montage of New Yorkers discovering body after body for weeks and months after the robbery. The use of the Layla Coda says to the audience that the party is over. It was fun while it lasted, but the love affair with their naughty way of life has ended. From a needle drop standpoint, Marty could have used any song here. He certainly had the budget and talent to make anything work. But when you look at the film through the eyes of a filmmaker interpreting the themes of the film through the soundtrack, Layla is the only obvious choice. That's how I've always interpreted Scorsese's use of the Layla Coda, but here's what others have said about it. In a write-up for TheRinger.com, Elizabeth Nelson writes of Goodfellas, its deep dive into the ecosystem of the New York Mafia in the 1960s and 70s depicts an underworld becoming gradually more corrupted in rough lockstep with America itself. Subsumed by excess, disloyalty, and runaway appetites, it mirrors the manner in which Nixon's petty crimes yielded to the exploitative gambits of Reaganomics and finally metastasized into whatever one calls the hybrid caste system cum stock market fetish cult we exist in currently. Whew. That's a load. So Nelson is coming at Goodfellas with a socio-economic political theory, which is perfectly valid, and the jumping off point for why, according to her article, Layla was used. She goes on to write, perhaps best of all, Goodfellas represents Scorsese's most poignant and comprehensive marriage of sound and vision. With a massive score, including 123 different tunes invariably applied with a rich attention to detail, it acts as a kind of shadow survey of American popular music as it gradually curdles from the upbeat youth anthems of the early 60s into the ever more exhausted exertions of the woolly 1970s. The film's most famous sequence, the moment when the picture's dalliance with Kennedy-era nostalgia runs directly into the blood-chilling realities of the mob's enroaching wave of ultraviolence. Nelson goes on to interview film historian Glenn Kenny, who says that Scorsese's use of music are often reflections of a character's consciousness, but also to functioning components of that consciousness and the consciousness of the filmmaker as well. Nelson and Kenny go on to discuss the Layla choice as quintessential Scorsese, citing the discrepancy between the mood of the music and the barbarity of the imagery on screen. And, as it concerns the main character of our chief narrator, Henry Hill, played by the late Ray Liotta, there is a delusion taking place. The upbeat music suggests that Hill still thinks he's in the heyday of the mob life. Nelson writes, all around him, Henry's friends are being slaughtered, but even though he too is embroidered in the Lufthansa scheme, Henry perceives no particular danger to himself. Having navigated around them for so long, consequences have become an abstraction. Henry's long winning streak has warped into certitude. In this way, Goodfellas is a twisted vision of American optimism. So while I instinctually interpreted the choice of Scorsese drawing parallels between the love affair with a woman and the love affair with a way of life, I feel that Nelson and Kenny's socioeconomic take adds to the theory in a way that works. It neither negates nor validates my initial interpretation, but builds on it in a way that I previously wouldn't have thought. You see, being born in 1981, I don't think much about the politics that predates my existence, but it makes sense that Scorsese would be influenced by the political turmoil of the 1970s. Certainly, there are many films where I do perceive them through a political or economic lens, but dialed into my own experience. Monica Lewinsky, 9/11, the housing crash of 2008, the rise of MAGA, and January 6th. Much of how I interpret The Wolf of Wall Street is informed by my lived experience during the 2008 housing market crash, Lehman Brothers. That whole era totally screwed up my life, so it makes sense that it would inform how I interpret films moving forward. Same thing with the Star Wars prequels and Bush-era politics, but those examples are for another episode. If you have thoughts on why Scorsese used the Layla Coda, feel free to send me a message on social media or through the contact form of my website. I'd like to hear from you. Remember, this is about how I instinctually see certain creative choices, as I myself am a filmmaker, and so there is no right or wrong way to interpret a movie. Even if Scorsese were to come out and say, "This is what I actually meant," or "This was my intention," it still wouldn't negate the way I or you interpret his choice. That's the point of art and the beauty of cinema. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next one.